the thing?
Yeah. All right. We are live again with Tugboat's infamous office hours.
Infamous?
In the infamous. It means more than famous. Let me make sure it's pushing to Instagram. It takes a second to get there typically. I did update the stream key, but it looks like it's not going there. So let's try this again. Oh, I may have had the wrong one in there. Let's try this once more. And I think that's going to work.
Live on YouTube.
It's not showing on Instagram. Instagram is the one that gives us the most hassle, but it is the one where people join us the most. So
Yeah,
I like to make it work there.
definitely make that work.
All right, let me do this real fast. I'm going to go out and come in and try and fix Instagram. So you guys hold down the fort for a moment.
Oh no. Make sure that Facebook is working too.
It's so strange that you can't like reliably just set it up before going live. It's always like, nah, we gotta see what happens.
I know, it's so weird.
All right, let's see if that works. Come on, Instagram.
All right, we got Facebook is working.
Try. I'm gonna retry Instagram all over again. Like recreate a new stream over there and see if that helps it in a second. Oh, it says it's working. Yep, there we go.
Cool.
All right, we are live on Instagram. Oh, I do have our orientation wrong for Instagram, but we'll keep it that way. I don't want to change it now that we're live. It doesn't let me actually. All right, we're live there. Push that there.
What'd you have on the agenda, bud?
Let me pull this up here. A couple of different things. I want to talk about post-claims underwriting. We've actually never talked about it on the live before. And then a little bit about appraisal. I think some of these wildfire claims are going to be going to appraisal, and that'll probably happen sooner than later.
Some policies don't allow.
Some of them policies don't allow.
Specifically in wild, is it? I think it might be actually a California code that doesn't allow it.
Oh, it is.
We should check on that.
I'll double check on it. Maybe do a search on it because I think you might be right that it is a California code.
I'm looking it up.
But and then I thought we might be able to do a little bit of a walkthrough, Aaron, of the Tugboat's inventory service, just to have it on here as well. Might be able to use it to post some content about it as well. So I have a screen pulled up for that. So first, I want to talk about post-claims underwriting. This came up. We were talking about the inspection that we had at Aaron, yours, and my friend's house. This inspection I had. I'm his public adjuster, and the backstory on this one is that there are certain aspects of the claim that are being denied. For instance, his stucco has a bunch of soot and ash, more like soot, like fire debris all over it because the fire was like against his house. So it's all stained black. And the stucco job was done fairly poorly. And so when you try to pressure wash it or when you try and heavily wash it in anyway, the stucco falls off, right? And so the discussion that was had with the adjuster, he was like, oh, well, that's a wear and tear issue, right? The fact that the stucco falls off when you try to repair it. And we ended up in this discussion or argument about whether or not it should be covered, right? In his mind, oh, it's falling off because of this wear and tear. It wasn't properly installed. In my mind and my argument, which was correct, was
As
that, which were not, I mean, not always. I would say, like, when I'm arguing with an adjuster, it's 90%. When I'm arguing with my wife, it's 20%. When I'm arguing with my children, it's 0%. Anyway, so I was essentially explaining to the adjuster, proximate cause of losses. There was a fire here, right? There's a wildfire. It affected this stucco. That stucco needs to be cleaned. Now, not just cleaned, decontaminated. The whole place came back positive for lead and asbestos. And we agreed, like, hey, you can't decontaminate it and clean it without damaging it. But he's like, but that's because of wear and tear, right? And so we had this conversation about, because I brought up, I'm like, no, the insurance company had the opportunity to you can see that this stucco has done a bad job if you underwrote this claim well. And when you inspect the house, it's cracked, it's a couple other areas. It wouldn't be that hard to know that this stucco, and because the same argument had come up with his roof. His roof had some shingles that had melted from the heat of the fire. Some were wind damaged, and the roof was 30 years old with a shingle that's discontinued. Cannot be repaired according to any roofer. The ones that they sent out, we sent out. And so they had tried to make the same argument for the roof initially of, hey, that's not our fault. His roof is old. He can't repair it. And it's like, well, you had the opportunity when you underwrote this policy to do it. So Aaron, I guess for anyone watching, give the quick overview. I'll let you chime in for a second. What is the underwriting process on the claim? None of us here are underwriters. None of us here are even producers, but I think we have a general understanding enough of what underwriting is. So,
sure. Yeah. And again, not an underwriter, but it's just when they determine like whether it fits into their risk portfolio, and it helps them set the premium. So it's the assessment of the property, or whatever the risk is. And it's the process by which they assess the risk to determine, hey, does this fall within our scope of the risk that we're willing to adopt, and how much are we going to charge in premiums to insure this property?
Yeah, exactly. Anything else to add on that, Chris or Rachel? On what underwriting is? You guys are our underwriting team for today. So if we say anything that's wrong, you guys can go ahead and let us know.
So I was researching appraisals still, so I was.
Oh, cool. That's fine. So
yeah.
Anyways, as Aaron said, underwriting is the process by which an insurance company determines if your property is insurable, how risky it is, right? And therefore, how should we set the premiums based on how risky it is? And different insurance companies have different levels of thoroughness when they underwrite a home, right? Some of them do almost nothing other than look up the address and the year it was built and send you an offer of a policy, right? Others, my insurance company, they asked me to take photos around all of the outside of my house and my other structures and send those in. And then they offered me a policy, but they didn't use those photos and they didn't have me take any pictures of the inside of my house, only the outside. And then they said, when I got my policy back, it said I had a tile roof when I had a shingle roof. It said I had siding when I had stucco. It said I had slab, even though I sent photos of my crawl space. So all that to say, even sometimes when they seem like they're being thorough, it seems like they're not using the data. Part of the conversation I want to have, or what we're going to get around to in a second here, is post-claims underwriting. And why it's important. We've talked a lot in recent weeks on office hours about denials, common reasons for denials, things like wear and tear, latent defect, improper construction, these things that they'll say are the reasons that they're denying a claim. And a lot of it comes back to this argument of like, hey, they had the opportunity to deal with this during underwriting. So anyways, the final note I'll put on this, or I guess we can, it's not the final note. What's been frustrating to me even in that conversation I had with that adjuster on site at the person's house about, hey, like you guys had the opportunity to underwrite this house properly and you didn't do it. Like if you didn't want to insure this stucco, you didn't have to, right? And you had the opportunity. And this house has only been insured for, it was like 2 or 3 years. So there's no change to the stucco. It's not like they changed it and the insurance company didn't know, nothing like that, right? And what is this? What is the most frustrating thing to me about that now at this point? I think in the past, you could maybe use the excuse of, well, maybe someone's being deceitful. They're not telling their insurance company everything about their house when they had the opportunity to. You know, it asks you on the application maybe about things that are worn out or deteriorated, and maybe the onus is on you. AI and photo identification is so good now that all of that doesn't matter anymore, right? With the photos that I uploaded to my insurance company, my insurer could so easily, they could tomorrow have, with all the money and resources they have an underwriting system that was more thorough than any human ever could have been when it came to identifying how risky your roof was, how worn and torn your house was. You could have them take photos of all their plumbing connections behind toilets, right? Like things you could make them do and just upload photos and have such a thorough underwriting process. And it wouldn't be that hard or costly for an insurance company to do it. It may even cost less than some of the things they do now. So my question I'll throw to you guys, and all of us are biased. I'll say that on the front end, like all of us work as policyholder advocates in one way or another, and helping policyholders. But why might an insurance company not be as thorough as they could be during underwriting? What's the reason that they're not doing it? Chris is going to raise his hand. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, you go first, Chris.
I mean, as we're seeing here in these fires, this has been the topic already of some of these Facebook lives has been, can you hear me okay? You're making a funny face.
No, I was just looking at the chat, so you're good.
That's just your face.
That's just my face. Sorry. Yeah, I can't. Whenever I start multitasking, people are like, I see what you're doing. Can you please stop?
You look disgusted. And I was like, what do I say?
Yeah, well.
No, it's just like what we're seeing a lot already in the fires. That's been a big discussion because, sorry, now I have stuff going on in my background. There, just like in the fires, there are a lot of houses. If you just do an average underwriting where you just kind of do the minimum amount possible, sometimes like on your roof, you're going to get a tile roof that says instead of a shingle roof. And that's like to your favor somehow, sort of a little bit. But most of the time they're going to under insure everybody because they're going to put the wrong information. Like they're going to, like they said, it's on a slab instead of a foundation that requires, digging out the slab and things. And anyways, so ultimately it ends up so that they pay less money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, Rachel, any other reasons why they might not be motivated to thoroughly underwrite a claim? Rachel, what do you got?
I think to get the premium in the bracket that somebody can afford, that they want to be in. If they give too much, well, that's it could be a whole other premium grade. So
yeah.
Bad.
I think that's actually, that's the primary reason because
yeah, that's probably especially at the agent level.
Yeah, and an agent is the one that's writing these policies, right? And I think this is where so much of the disconnect is. When I was talking with this adjuster, the story I was sharing, and I was talking with him about the underwriting, I was like, look, you guys had the opportunity to underwrite this claim. You insured this stucco. And he was like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. That has nothing to do with it. And my response was, that has everything to do with it, right? This is the policy that but I understand actually what he's saying, because I used to be an adjuster and I shared no relationship with the agent that sold the policy. Aaron and I were talking to an agent. This was, probably 6 months ago plus, but an agent from North Dakota. Actually, Aaron, I don't know if you were on the call, and she was talking with me. She was just frustrated with this adjuster that was working on a claim for a client of hers. And I was like, look, I'm going to be really honest with you. When I was an adjuster, I had a very low opinion of agents, and it's probably vice versa a lot of the time. But in my mind, they didn't know anything about claims. They were giving their clients probably incorrect information. It was my job just to look at the claim. And if they didn't think I should deny it, it really wasn't any of their business. Was like the demeanor that I had towards an agent when they may have called me when I was the adjuster, right? Because and a lot of times agents didn't seem to understand the policy that they had sold, right? They had oversold something, and so I had to be the bearer of bad news as the adjuster and be like, "Look, you shouldn't have told them that this was covered. This isn't covered," right? And so, I think, Rachel, your point of poor underwriting, insufficient underwriting happens as a result of agents just wanting to get premiums set.
Yeah.
Right.
Sales process.
Just want to close a sale and get someone paying insurance, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And we want homes to be insured, right? I do want to make sure I allow for the understanding that people need to be insured, and yet they have this idea that like I need to pay as little as possible for insurance. And so as someone shopping for insurance, if they're just like, just give me whatever you can, like I have to have insurance for my mortgage. I want to pay as little as possible. And the agent being like, okay, yeah, I'll figure out a way to make it work. Those things happen, and it's wrong for homeowners to approach insurance that way. But the onus is on the agent, right? Like they're the fiduciary to the insurance company to say like, no, I can't sell you something that's not going to insure your house properly, or whatever it might be. So all that to say, so let's get into what post claims underwriting is. And we can even use this same story, because I didn't use that phrase to the adjuster when I was talking with him about that claim, but that's what was happening in that moment. So Aaron, I'll throw it back to you for a second. I asked you what was underwriting a moment ago. What are we talking? Because we didn't know that phrase post-claims underwriting until we started researching this.
Well, it's just a cheeky, like, pejorative. It's not a real, like, it's not an actual like, industry definition.
But we were so happy when we learned it. We're like, oh, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's yeah. But I do actually have one more reason, and it's actually from the article that we shared before. The one that was at the San Francisco Tribune put out covering the fire. Yeah. They had talked, they had some quotes in there about a third reason why there might not be incentivized to underwrite claims properly, and it had to do with the time involved. And it's like, it's not just the cost competition, but like if you have to jump through hoops to get insured by this company and this other one, you can just get a policy written. Like, why would I go take all of these photos of my house? And so it was in defense of their underwriting practices. Someone quoted in that article had said, like, we had basically contrasted the time and inconvenience involved on one side of the scale and accuracy on the other.
Yep. Yeah.
But post-claims underwriting, again, it's just like a kind of a cheeky term, but it is a very real thing. And it's when after a claim happens, and a great example is this stucco that's damaged, that it's now we're going to misapply an exclusion or try to exclude coverage based on the presence of this pre-existing condition. Instead of, like, if your position was that wasn't insured, it was your obligation, or insurable, it was your obligation to not write that policy. So that would have been underwriting. And instead it's moving that till after a claim happens, after you've collected premiums, after this person has been trusting you to insure their property, to be like, never mind, we shouldn't have insured that.
Yeah. But so you're absolutely right. I think that's a great explanation. It's not the way that I think why we were relieved when we found the term post-claims underwriting was because it was hard to put a name to what we were seeing happen all the time, right? These denials and like just confusion around like, wait, like how is this coming up? But and it's not talked about in those terms. I don't know, but especially by the carrier side. And it's probably not a helpful term for a homeowner to ever say to their adjuster during the claims process. It probably would not help you in any way to say you're post claims underwriting my claim right now. But I do think it's
helpful from a strategic standpoint, right? Like if you're trying to talk through and just think through why exclusions are being applied the way that they are. The most common one, right, we see is like wear and tear exclusion, which is the exact case in the example that you're given, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, hey, there is an exclusion in most policies that if damage was caused by wear and tear, like you're making a claim because your stucco is old and chips when you look at it, that's different than you had a fire that affected your stucco, and now the repair scope creeped because it wasn't, it was brittle. So like those are two different things, but they'll take that and they'll apply the wear and tear exclusion as if you're making a claim for brittle stucco.
Yeah.
And apply it to the other stuff. And the thing is, when we were being trained as adjusters, right? Like we knew, like they'd give us training examples. We knew that this wasn't the case. And there's been this kind of erosion in care over the years, because like it was a very common thing. You'd see like there would be damage and windows would be rotten or whatever, but it's not the cause of the damage. It's not related to the damage. And it's like, you might have to replace those windows to effectuate the repair. And like, you can't just detach and reset a rotten window. It doesn't survive. So now you're replacing that window because it's rotten. And it's like, that would be like a common situation. Or like, oh, maybe under normal circumstances, we could have painted that, but like, you just can't, like, it doesn't get paintable. Termites ate it or whatever. But it's like, had you filed a claim for termites, that's denied. But if your window had termite damage and you had a claim that affected the window, it doesn't now exclude the window.
Well, I mean, this is the exact example that adjuster tried to make to me during that inspection. He threw a hypothetical at me, which in and of itself was ironic because adjusters typically hate hypotheticals. Mm-hmm. But he said, you know, what if all the windows here in this house were so rotten that if you touched them, like the panes just fell out and you couldn't clean them? And we all know that you have to clean all these windows because of all this smoke. Does that mean I owe for all the windows? And I was like, yeah, you shouldn't have insured all those windows. Should be pretty obvious that this house is falling apart.
Well, and the idea with underwriting, and which is a responsibility of the carrier, is that was accounted for in the premiums that the carrier set. Exactly.
They would charge, and if they were going to take on the risk that this might happen, they're going to charge more premiums for it, right? And so effectively what happens when post-claims underwriting happens and a claim gets denied for it, then all of a sudden you've been paying premiums on a coverage that you never had, right? Is what ends up being the result of that afterwards. This is interesting. I listened to a debate that Stephen Badger had with Chip Merlin a few weeks ago. It's funny, they had it live and then took it down from YouTube for a couple weeks, and then it just came back up, I think, last week. Have any of you guys watched that or listened to it?
No.
It's interesting. It's worth listening to. I think it's probably on YouTube. Chip has a new podcast or series called The Claim Game, I think, and it's good. He just did an interview with Jay Feinman, which I haven't listened to yet, and Jay Feinman is the one that wrote the book Delay, Deny, Defend, and which is the book that exposed Allstate's training material that told people to delay, deny, defend their claims. Anyways, in his conversation with Badger, this came up, this wear and tear issue. And what was really funny is Stephen Badger clearly agrees with everything that we're saying here. But the caveat, when you hear him talk about it, Chip asked him pretty blatantly, like, does wear and tear apply in situations like this? And he's no, but the answer he'll give is always this very minor example, saying, you know, yes, if if the roof is a little older and some of the shingles are going to be damaged, you know, and it's going to damage a few shingles to repair the 2 that are damaged, then sure, we should pay for those few extra shingles that are damaged because they couldn't. It never expands beyond that. And he like is really careful to say that it only applies in these minor instances, right? He doesn't explicitly say it only applies like, but if you were to say like, well, what if the whole roof isn't repairable when a few shingles were, he would clearly start being like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Like, we're not here to just replace roof when a few shingles are damaged. But like, there's like this limit to it in his head as to when it should apply, should be only in instances when it's not extreme. Right.
But it's just so funny because it has nothing to do with what the actual policy or what the code says. That's just how he feels about it. And the scary thing is that how he feels about it is it affects the policy writing so much because he's so involved in the wording of the policies and stuff.
Yeah,
so that's the person that is in charge of trying to figure out how to get his emotions into that policy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the thing though. It's in those extreme cases is when it would have been obvious to pick up an underwrite. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So old that the whole thing is unrepairable. You can tell that from a photo from the street, usually, right?
And some carriers do underwrite exactly that way, especially for
Yeah.
I do want to kind of take a step back from it a little bit though, because like it can logically, right? Let's get into like the principle of the coverage, because it can logically feel like, oh, that does sound unreasonable, right? Yeah. You have a couple of shingles damaged by wind on your roof. Like, why would you need, and why would the insurance company owe for an entire roof replacement? Like, that doesn't seem reasonable. Or like some of these examples might come off as someone's like listening to this, like, oh, this isn't like, I understand why they wouldn't want to pay for these things. But yeah, it's Cameron, if you have thoughts to add, I could talk about it for a bit, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of like trying to bring that home on like the underlying principles on like why these are arguments that we're having and why it's not unreasonable.
Yeah. I mean, the reason it's not unreasonable to expect that extreme repair in extreme circumstances is because of this underwriting process issue that we're talking about, right? Because if you have an older roof with shingles, say your roof is 35 years old and it's a 3-tab roof, which they don't really make, or they're not up to code anymore in many states. And it's going to damage, like it's just not really repairable to the standard that it would need to be to not leak anymore, to match, whatever it might be. If you start paying premiums on that roof and your insurance company had the opportunity to look at it, you've been paying for that roof to be insured, right? This whole time. And you may have been paying it for 10 years, right? And all these premiums that are going towards that roof. And then you have damage. Say hail comes and only damages a few of the shingles. And you have a roofer come out. He tells you, you know, I can't really touch this roof and sign off that it's not going to leak, or like it's not repairable for XYZ reason. And I mean, let's back up from the roof for a second. So I'll use a kind of a more clear example. There is a house that I've had this happen on several houses. There's a type of siding that was used, at least in California and probably in plenty of states, that used asbestos. So cannot be used anymore, is not made anymore, cannot be matched, right? And so there was a house that had a small fire and only a handful of that siding was affected by it. But there were 2 issues that came up. One, you're never going to match it, even though the whole house matched before that. And 2, the underlayment underneath it, you weren't going to be able to overlap it. So you weren't going to be able to properly waterproof it, and it wasn't going to properly match. And so only a little bit of this siding had been damaged, but all of it needed to get replaced at this point after this small fire. Now,
what time did you say we're leaving?
that fact could have been known by the insurance company, again, based off of a photo and a quick underwriting assessment. Hey, they have asbestos siding, and then the insurance company has a choice at that point. they can say, we're not going to insure the siding, which is totally reasonable. They could write a policy that says, essentially, in so many words, we insure this home, but we don't insure your asbestos siding, which means that if that's damaged, we're not paying for it to be repaired. Everything else we'll pay for. Or they can set the premiums in a way that allows them to insure that asbestos siding, right? Which means you'll have higher premiums because they know if that siding is ever damaged, they're going to have to pay for all of it. Now, here is where the problem is. That second thing, I think very rarely, if ever, happens. That's the thing that insurance companies aren't doing. They aren't looking at the asbestos siding and saying, well, let's go ahead and set some premiums nice and high so that we can insure this properly, right? And they're also not doing the first thing as often as they should, which is just not insuring it at all. Instead, what they're doing is like, hey, we're just going to pretend that you have regular siding that can be repaired, and we're going to insure your house based off of that reality. And then all of a sudden a claim happens and you've been paying for insurance on your siding that it never really was going to apply. So Aaron, you're asking,
well, yeah, and I want to kind of make sure that like this isn't like a gotcha moment to the insurance company, right? It's not like, oh, like the average homeowner is not in a position where they're like, hey, I want to make sure that this particular risk that I foresee as being a real possibility is brought into attention. Like they don't know, right? So it's not. It's just that like when a loss event happens, when a claim happens, like that's when the stuff starts coming to light if it wasn't properly underwritten, and that responsibility to underwrite it was with the carrier. And it's not, hey, you didn't disclose this to us. That's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
It's like this was an unknown entity, but not like, and whether or not they were going to be thorough enough to know the unknown, like, doesn't now, like, now they owe for it because now the policyholder can't be made whole. They can't have a waterproof house. They're going to be out, tens of thousands of dollars trying to waterproof their house. They're not going to be able to get the permits to get things done. They're not going to be able to complete the project or whatever it is, right? Have a completed kitchen, get it back to the way it was without these costs. Yeah. And it's like, that's what's owed for. You have to put the policyholder whole. You have to restore their situation and not leave them out because you insured the property.
Yeah. And the pin I'll put in this one is just to bring it back to my house for a second. And as an example of how what so many agents are sensitive to isn't risk, it's just premium amount, is that when I got my policy, which listed all these incorrect things about my house, right? Tile roof instead of shingle, siding instead of stucco, slab instead of raised foundation, and a number of other things. And I pointed that out to the agent. I wrote to her and I said, hey, all these things are wrong. She wrote back to me and said, well, if I change your roof from a tile to a shingle roof, it's going to raise your premiums and it's going to make it ACB on this policy. Do you still want me to do that? She asked me, like, do you still want me to do it? Which is kind of insane because and I understand, like, she's afraid. Oh, and she said it's going to raise your premiums. It was like $9 a year, but she knows that people are so premium sensitive that if I'm just thinking about the dollars and cents and my premiums, and I'm comparing this policy to the whatever AAA policy that I may have been asked for, and now theirs is more, I might be like, well, I'm going to go switch to the other one. So she was willing for me to tell her to keep my policy inaccurate so that my premiums wouldn't go up by $9 a year, I think is all it was.
Then that would, if that
would have been fraud.
Come back it would have been
fraud. Yeah, I know.
It would have been fraud and you would have been complicit in it.
Yeah. And yeah, that's insane. That's crazy. That's utter madness.
Yeah, it's great. So anyways, I told her, yes, please make my roof accurate. I will pay the $9. I will take the fact that it's an ACB roof for now until I...
Also, do you want to take my online course on how to not commit fraud?
But that's just to say, yeah, premium sensitivity is where people is what I think people are exposed to the most, not thorough underwriting. And post claims underwriting is a real issue. And I think it is one of the main issues. They're on LinkedIn is where the discussion around things like this happen the most in our world. And if you look at the carrier advocates, the Stephen Badgers, the Matthew Monsons, and others like them, if you were to ask them, hey, what are the biggest problems plaguing our industry? They're without a doubt going to say it's inflated estimates from contractors, it's public adjusters, way overstating losses, it's attorneys filing frivolous lawsuits. This is the reason that premiums are where they are. Things are not properly insured, XYZ. And if you were to ask us on this side, I think if someone were to ask me right now, hey, what are some of the biggest problems? Right now, I would say this post-claims underwriting one is like a top 3 one for me. Like this is because the biggest perpetrators of it are the biggest insurers.
Yeah.
Right. And so
it's kind of become standard on every claim. Is like they're trying to find a way to use these tactics. The bigger insurance are.
Yeah. So we see it so often that I would say, like, yeah, this one is at the forefront for me of one of the biggest issues plaguing property insurance at the moment. All right. Let's
have any
talk.
practical like advice for people of what to do to combat that, like going into their claim, because we're talking about like what the issue is with for post claim stuff.
Let me do a policy review.
Yeah, that's generally is like doing policy review, but also like just getting into your claim and hyper documentation of everything, and documenting your house the way it is now before a claim is so important, which gets us further into like our inventory review.
Yeah.
But pre-claim documentation twice a year, doing just 4 photos in every room at the very minimum, just walk through and you can very clearly then argue like, well, this is the way that it was before and this is the way it is now. It's different.
Yeah, it's particularly like important, like it on smoke damage and then like water damage. Some of the materials, like especially if you have, MDF baseboards or something, they just deteriorate like quickly and things like that. Like getting those frequent photos so that they can't be like, oh, this has been going on for a long time or this was pre-existing. Because after a disaster happens, like sewer backups, like they happen, right? Your house it's a disaster. You can't tell if you kept your house nice before that or not. It's destroyed. Or hurricanes, like they're destroyed. Fires, smoke, like everything's wrecked. Like it's really, when you're looking at that situation, it's really easy to like assume that it was filthy before. Right, like that all the photos are filthy. They don't have a baseline. Yeah, I remember there was a restaurant that I did a claim for when I was an adjuster, and I like couldn't eat at that restaurant after that because like the only state in which I ever saw their kitchen was disgusting.
I have one of those currently right now,
and I'm just like, I used to like this place, but I just can't do it. But it's like it's hard for the adjuster to get it. I mean, it's just that's all they see. And so just knowing that, and then Emily commented that she foresees this being an issue on her stucco. And so like as far as advice, like honestly, these are arguments that we make all the time. I'm not even gonna like try to tell somebody how to make it on their own, right? Like we'll make it for you. Just come. Tugboats cheap. Like we're gonna help you. Just sign.
Emily's a regular.
Yeah.
She's a regular.
Yeah. I know.
That damage is consequential to the repair that was probably written by the insurance adjuster. They decided this is what needs to happen. So it's kind of easy to combat. I mean, well, it should be.
Yeah, no, it's straightforward. It's not always easy, right? When they're not being reasonable, but it is straightforward.
Oh, we love you too.
Love you too.
Yeah, I guess the final, Chris, you were asking like, what should people do about there's the pre-loss documentation. Most people that work with us have a claim, and so I think just being aware of it, because even the claim I was talking about earlier, the homeowner is like, well, it does sound reasonable what he's saying. Like my stucco it sounds really reasonable to be like, oh yeah, I guess like this. And a lot of times your adjuster can just say something to, and because you don't understand policy and everything like that, like then when they're like, yeah, that's wear and tear isn't covered. You don't understand what they're saying is nonsense because they're saying terms and practices that like you don't have
quoting policy language. They're just doing it out of context. And
yeah, exactly.
Well, it goes into what Aaron was asking before. Is like look at it from both sides, like Steelman the other side of it, and be like, yeah, it does. It like from a reasonable eye. If we're just talking about reasonability, you can look at that and be like, yeah, it was damaged before, so I can get what they're saying. And that's the hard part that a lot of even sometimes adjusters have coming to terms with is we're not fixing this house as if we were just somebody that had $5,000 in our savings and we just need to get the thing done. We're fixing our house because we are engaged in a legal contract with another entity that has agreements on how the house needs to be fixed. And so we're fixing it to the standards of the policy and the standards of the code, not just the standards of what is reasonable. And that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah, for sure. And you're charged premiums based on that contract.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, give us the updates on appraisal for wildfire claims. Well, first, tell us what appraisal is and how it applies to wildfire claims. And I think you're right that it doesn't.
It does-ish. So appraisal is essentially arbitration, where like the two sides can't agree. They hire a independent third party. Each side, the insured and the insurer, hires a representative to go and evaluate the claim, and they try and come up with an agreement on the scope and the price. And then if that doesn't work, then it goes to an umpire who makes a final decision. That all costs money and is not as it's kind of a Wild West thing. There's not a lot of laws around it. Arbitration law tends to apply to it when it goes to court, but other than that, there is no specific code or laws around it. Can you take that in the other room? Sorry. And so about specifically with wildfires, can you hear like all the conversation?
Well, I don't know. I hear voices.
A little off and on. It's a little better now.
Anyways, and during a wildfire event, we're all family people here. We just got family stuff going on.
I'm the only one not related right here.
That's true,
right?
Not yet, Rachel. We're gonna.
We're figuring out a way.
Yeah.
I'm for it's fine.
Anyway, so during a wildfire appraisal, you can engage in appraisal if both parties agree, but it can't be compelled. And so and normally when there's an appraisal, as soon as you call an appraisal between yourself and adjuster as an insured, they have to agree and assign an appraiser. Or if they don't agree, then a court will compel them to agree. And when there's a wildfire, 2071 specifically states that during a declared disaster event, that you can enter into appraisal, but it cannot be compelled. So they can simply just say, no, we don't want to go to appraisal if they don't agree.
This is specifically California.
And there's also something that is a problematic in that, and during these wildfire claims, is what we're also seeing is that the carriers are not agreeing to provide a contractor that can do the work for the amount that they are saying. And so ultimately they're leaning on some things like this appraisal thing and some other language and policies, and to say that they can just be the sole determination of the number of the claim. So it can be problematic, these two things together.
Yeah. And them providing a contractor like to back up their bid, actually, I believe is also a requirement under the code. So I don't know how they're getting around that one.
Well, it's if you want to talk about that, I can explain what I'm saying for the next 30 seconds, hopefully shortly. Is that okay?
I'd like to know more. Yeah.
Yeah. So the code actually has 3 stipulations, and it's the second of 3 stipulations. One, it says simply pay the difference between your estimate, the carrier estimate, and the insured's contractor's estimate. That's the first option. Second option is provide a contractor to do the work for the scope of the insurance company, and it says, or the third option is that you reasonably adjust the estimates. And so we're that's part of the legal discussion that we're having right now is if they is does that code kick in as soon as, because it says if the insured requests a contractor to do it for the amount you have to give it, but because it also then after that says or reasonably adjust the claim, they're leaning on that or and saying that, oh, we just chose number 3. We get that you're asking us for a contractor, but we don't have to do that because it says or we can just adjust your claim, and that's what we have done. That's what's being.
Oh, it's so fun. So
Yeah,
fun.
so.
It's because adjusting is like far removed from like what it means, so that like it doesn't.
Yeah.
The word has no weight. Like
So
like,
what-
I didn't adjust the outcome, but
Essentially,
I
what that like in essence, what that means is the carrier adjusts the claim and gives a dollar amount, and that dollar amount now becomes just firm. Like this is the amount that the claim is going to cost because we have adjusted it and say so.
Yeah,
And so
that's really great. I love that.
Question I have, and I don't know if any of you all have thoughts on it, is that appraisal has been a big part of, like, a growing part of claims for the last 5 years, right? Chris and I, working on the public adjusting side, the past 5 years, we'll meet other public adjusters that are like, oh, every one of my claims goes to appraisal, essentially. Like, it's just a part of the process. I eventually invoke appraisal on pretty much every single one. And other ones that have never touched it, or maybe touched it once and had a really bad experience, and like, why would I ever go to appraisal? I'll just get an attorney involved and file a lawsuit. And I've started to hear more conversation. I know Stephen Badger talks about it, and some of the even on the advocacy, the policy advocacy side, or the policy holder side, that there are some reforms essentially needed for it, because it feels a little bit like the Wild West. I think you said that. And there aren't a whole bunch of rules around it. And so if you don't like the process by which an umpire gets assigned, you can try and force that through a legal process. You can make it really hard on a homeowner by having hearings that are expensive. There are ways that kind of each side is trying to strategically use appraisal, which, from what I can tell, was this process put in there to help resolve disputes. And more so now, it has become like a way of opening up a new dispute. It's just like kind of changing the playing field a little bit. I don't know, Chris and Rachel, I'm not sure what your understanding of this, but like, do you have any expectation of where you see that kind of heading for do you see it growing still? I feel like I heard a lot of people talking about it a year and a half ago, and it's kind of quieted down a little bit. And I think some of that has to do with carriers became more educated themselves in how they could be a little bit more strategic in the appraisal process. And so public adjusters weren't quite as fast to invoke.
Yeah, this is something where both the carrier and public adjusters and attorneys side get to exercise a lot of gray area. And so there's a lot of reasons that we would want it more regulated, and there's a lot of reasons why some people would want it less regulated. And I think what's going to happen, my prediction is what's going to happen is there's some ways of doing an appraisal that are very unethical, and ways of choosing the appraisers and the umpires and things like that are very unethical. And I think it's going to get to a point where somebody gets caught with their pants down really bad, and it becomes a little bit of a scene, and it'll cause more regulation on it, because it's kind of a good old boys club. And if you know somebody who knows somebody, you can get your appraisal done in a way that's favorable to you. And
yeah, and I mean, just to be really honest about it too, I know people that see appraisal as an opportunity to make a lot of money, because, and with the same way that a lot of people that have been in the industry for a while on both sides, right? I see this with people that want to consult for carriers and people that want to work for public adjusters, but like an expert witness does, because you can charge these kind of obscene rates and be like, I'm going to charge $500, I'm going to charge $1,000 an hour. I'm going to charge like more than $1,000 an hour. I'm going to charge $1,500 an hour for my time. And experts really enjoy that because typically they're not having to prepare as much. They're not doing as many inspections. They can show up, offer their opinions for a while, and charge a whole bunch of money for it. And appraisal became something similar where because good ones that were able to negotiate really well could really raise the value of a claim.
Mhm.
All of a sudden you had a claim that had $100,000 dispute. And I think it probably was pretty regular for an appraisal to cost, somewhere in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, probably for a long time. Suddenly people are having to budget $5,000 to $15,000 plus to go to appraisal with a good appraiser.
And people are really budgeting a percentage. I mean, there's a way of doing it with an attorney involved that you're ultimately paying a percentage for an appraisal, which is the opposite of how it was intended to be, because the appraiser should not have incentive to have the appraisal go any certain way. They should have incentive to show up and do their job per the hour.
Mhm.
But and so yeah.
Emily's sharing a story about an appraisal. I'm going to put this one on the screen for a second so we can see it. She says the person I spoke, she was talking about someone that had an appraisal. That she was talking about, was that
The Marshall Fire.
from the Marshall Fire 4 years ago? The person I spoke to just finished appraisal. The fire was in December of 21. Their carrier didn't agree with the remediation recommendations from their industrial hygienist test results. So their house has just been sitting there this entire time. This is a really good point to bring up because sometimes, I'm even guilty of this myself. People will think that appraisal is a way to speed up the claims process because things will be going really slow. And so they'll think like, well, let's invoke appraisal. Now it's not going to be me and my adjuster and the hygienist and their contractor and my contractor and the dozen experts that are involved. Now it's just going to be two appraisers. They can meet and talk about it, come to a reasonable answer, maybe an umpire. So it seems like it's so simplified. But some of this comes back to the fact that the good appraisers will have 30 appraisals that they're working on at once,
Exactly.
and no incentive to do yours really quickly, and because there's no regulations around it. There's no even the ones that exist around the claims process don't exist within the appraisal, where there's no regulations that say you have to get these things done in 15 or 30 or 40 days or 60 days, whatever it might be. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
So,
Depending on who's the appraisers and the umpires, it can be 3 months to 2 years.
This claim was from 2021, which an appraisal was probably invoked a couple years ago on it. And that, Emily, unfortunately, we've heard that story a lot of times, right? That's something sad. And it's a huge challenge because there aren't a lot, if any, options of moves you can do in a claim, strategic ones, to suddenly make it start going really quick, right? And people will think that there is, and they'll think that maybe the one that, because appraisal is expensive, and if I find a good appraiser, that's going to make it go really fast. And it's like, not really. You don't have control over the insurance company's appraiser, and they might be really slow, or the umpire, and they might be really slow. People will be like, well, what if we file a lawsuit tomorrow? It's like, well, lawsuits certainly aren't fast. If you file it tomorrow, they have 4 weeks to respond. They can get it continued. They can file discovery. Then they can do depositions. All of those things I just said can get continued themselves. And then you get a trial date, which will likely get continued. It's like, okay, so it's a minimum of a year, likely closer to 2 before that goes anywhere. And then someone would be like, well, what if I just have a letter written by an attorney? Right? What if I just have them do that? It's like none of these options work really quickly, including appraisal. So, I would say appraisal is a very useful process and the correct thing to do in some claims. I just invoked appraisal on a claim that I'm working on as the public adjuster.
Yeah, it can be helpful on the way to a lawsuit as well too, because then the lawsuit, the scope of the lawsuit will be based on the findings of the appraisal.
Yeah. So it has its place, but there are some public adjusters that see it as this kind of magic ticket towards a good outcome that's in the and I think for a moment there in time there was a better likelihood of that happening because carriers weren't aware enough of the appraisal process and how it could work, but that's become less true by the day. And it was never true all the way to begin with. So all that to say, I think it's just good to know what you're getting into when it comes to appraisal, and if it even applies for your claim now. And if you have a wildfire claim, all right, now we're 6-7 months past the date of loss. People are starting to get exhausted. Rachel, do you feel like claims are stalled for the wildfires? Do you feel like they're progressing still? What's kind of the average thing that you would say?
I can't say one blanket thing, honestly. Like everybody's kind of in the spot now. Not everybody. There are several people that are only now getting hygienist reports. 6 months in, they've asked for them. They had a protocol from the carrier vendor that came out to scope the loss, and they've just been kind of sitting, wondering what is happening. But the great thing is everybody is connected on Facebook. So they're learning from each other what to do and what not to do. And so I think that's why so many people now are doing hygienist reports. And everybody's also, they're reading about the toxins that are there that were unknown to them.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first claims that a tugboat member that signed up. It was like 6 weeks, not one of the first, but certainly I would say end of February at the latest. She was ready to move back in her house. I wonder about her. I can't remember her name.
Yeah.
Because we're helping so many people, and if she wasn't active, then I really don't know where she is now. But she was moving back into her home.
Yeah.
She worked all the stuff herself. I wonder what she's thinking right now.
Yeah.
You know, where is that? But everybody's in a kind of holding pattern, honestly. Waiting on hygienist reports. These guys are really busy.
Yeah.
Or
We
contractors to read them.
Yeah. Aaron, myself, and Cody Shaver were in Altadena last week. And we saw several people that were back living in their houses clearly, which was kind of crazy to see because it was these devastated neighborhoods where debris removal is still going on in some places. And it's just depressing. You think, what is it like to live here? And we know it's unsafe to live here. If most likely still, it's probably getting safer by the day because most debris removal has been finished. But yeah, it was a lot of people just wanted to get back in their house as quick as possible. But I think, we're learning more and more about how dangerous that was. I just seen if we had any more comments. We don't right now. So we're going to go ahead and finish up a couple minutes before the hour. Today we talked about, post-claims underwriting, appraisal. If anyone has any questions for stuff they want us to cover next week, we have a few people still watching on Facebook, it looks like, YouTube, some on Instagram. You can always feel free to send us a message. If you have a claim, you can go to tugboat.claims and get our claim support there. If you have a wildfire claim, it's free, tugboat.claims/wildfire. We want to make sure that people have support so that they can navigate their claims and have a better outcome. So, Aaron, we'll see you and your kids later.
Are you hearing them? I mean, I can hear them, but I don't know what's coming through.
But yeah, appreciate everyone joining. Chris, Rachel, we appreciate you and all the work you guys are doing for homeowners out there. So